First time her son saw her sleeping on a piece of cardboard outside a closed shop in New Kingston, he did not run to her. He did not call her name. He did not bend down and ask, "Mama, what happened to you?" Instead, he looked at the woman beside him, adjusted the cuff of his expensive shirt, and crossed to the other side of the road as if the old, dirty, trembling woman on the ground had never carried him in her womb. Miriam Johnson opened her eyes just in time to see him turn away. That was the moment her heart broke for the last time. Not when the landlord threw her belongings onto the street. Not when hunger twisted her stomach until she could barely stand. Not when strangers pinched their faces and stepped away from her smell. Not even when rain soaked her to the bone while she slept beneath broken roofing and torn plastic. It was this, seeing one of the 6 children she had nearly died to raise, look at her with shame. Kingston can be merciless, but the cruelty of blood turning its back is a deeper wound than poverty could ever carve. There had been a time when Miriam was the center of a small, struggling universe. She had not been rich, educated, or connected. She had not owned land or inherited money. She had only possessed 2 things: stubborn faith and the kind of mother's love that keeps a woman standing long after her strength has already gone. She was born and raised in hardship, and hardship never really left her. It only changed shape over the years. As a young woman, she learned quickly that in Jamaica, especially in the rough corners where people survived from week to week, life did not pause to comfort anybody. If you fell sick, bills still waited. If your heart broke, children still needed food. If a man made promises and disappeared, rent still had to be paid. Miriam had 6 children, and each one came into the world through pain, prayer, and sacrifice. Their fathers were unreliable men, the kind who could love loudly for a season and vanish when responsibility grew heavy. In the end, Miriam stopped waiting to be rescued. She became mother and father, nurse and provider, protector and comforter. She sold fruits at the roadside. She washed clothes for wealthier families. She cleaned houses with swollen feet. She stayed up late mending school uniforms under poor lighting until her eyes burned. Some nights she fed her children and drank water to silence her own hunger. Nobody saw those sacrifices as greatness at the time. They looked ordinary because so many poor women carry impossible burdens without applause. But every success her children would later claim had first been built on Miriam's tired back. She was the one who walked children to school through flooded streets. She was the one who sat in clinics for hours when fever came. She was the one who pawned the little jewelry she had to pay exam fees. She was the one who knelt by the bed, whispering prayers over sleeping bodies, asking God to let their future be kinder than her past. And for a while, it seemed like heaven had heard her. One child got a scholarship. Another found work in a respectable office. Another married into a family with money. One moved in circles Miriam had only seen on television. Another became involved with politicians and business leaders. The youngest learned quickly how to speak the language of ambition and appearances. They rose. And as they rose, they began to look back at the life they came from with discomfort. At first, the change was small enough to ignore. Fewer visits, shorter phone calls, embarrassed laughter when Miriam showed up dressed too plainly around their polished friends. Then came the requests, disguised as advice. "Mama, you need to dress better if you are coming here. Mama, don't tell people certain things. Mama, just call first. You can't show up looking any way. Mama, you wouldn't understand how this world works." Their words were gentle on the surface, but sharp underneath. They were slowly teaching her that she no longer fit into the lives she had bled to build. Still, Miriam defended them, even when they delayed helping with rent, even when birthdays passed with nothing but excuses, even when they sent money to church events, parties, and public donations, but claimed they were too burdened to assist their own mother. She made excuses for them because mothers often confuse denial with hope. Then age began to tighten around her life. Work became harder to get. Her knees ached constantly. Her back stiffened. Washing, scrubbing, bending, lifting, things she had done for years, now left her nearly breathless. Employers wanted younger women. Energy left her body, but responsibilities remained. Bills piled up. The little room she rented became impossible to keep. She sold what she could, then she borrowed. Then she begged her children quietly, telling herself it was only temporary. Each refusal came dressed differently, but it was refusal all the same. One daughter said her husband was uncomfortable with certain situations. One son claimed his apartment building had strict rules. Another told her she needed professional help, as if poverty were madness. One promised to call and never did. Another sent a driver with a small envelope once, then vanished for months. The youngest said taking her in would affect important relationships. Miriam went from child to child, carrying not luggage because she had almost nothing left, but dignity stripped down to its final thread. Nobody opened the door wide enough for her to stay. The day the landlord finally put her out, her belongings looked too small to represent a whole life. A basin, a sheet, a few pieces of clothing, an old Bible with pages falling loose, a framed photograph cracked across the middle. She stood on the roadside staring at the heap, too stunned to cry at first. Neighbors watched from windows and verandas. Some pitied her, some gossiped, none intervened. By evening the sky darkened, and rain began to fall. She tried one last child. Her daughter lived behind a high gate in a quiet, respectable neighborhood where the houses looked like security had been built into the walls. Miriam stood outside, soaked, clutching her bag. When the intercom answered, her voice shook. "It's me, Mama. I just need a place for tonight." There was a long silence. Then the daughter came outside, but only far enough to stay under the covered entrance. "Mama, you cannot come here like this. Like this. Not tired. Not hurting. Not displaced. Not heartbroken. Like this." As if Miriam had chosen disgrace the way other women choose a dress. The gate never opened. After that night, the street became her address. She learned where to sleep without being kicked awake. She learned which businesses dumped leftovers and which security guards had a little mercy. She learned how quickly people stop seeing you once your clothes are dirty enough. Her body carried the smell of dust, sweat, neglect, and open air. Her hair knotted. Her face aged beyond its years. She became one more broken woman moving through Kingston's bright business spaces, like a shadow nobody wanted cast near them. But the deepest humiliation came in New Kingston. She had wandered there hungry, driven partly by instinct and partly by the foolish little hope that one of her children might still look at her and remember love. The glass buildings rose around her, like monuments to another class of human being. She watched cars glide past. She watched women in high heels and men in clean suits moving with certainty. Then she saw two of her children outside one of the major corporate offices. They looked successful, comfortable, important. For one dangerous second, a mother's joy rose in her despite everything. She stepped forward. "Son." Her voice cracked in the middle of the word. They turned. Their eyes met hers. She saw recognition, then panic, then shame. Without a word, One turned his head sharply and looked across the road as though something there demanded urgent attention. The other pretended to be occupied by a phone that had not been in her hand a second earlier. Together, they moved away from her, crossing the street, creating distance, protecting their image from the sight of the woman who had once held both of them against her chest when thunder frightened them as children. Miriam stopped where she was. The city noise seemed to pull back. She did not call after them again. She did not cry out. Something inside her had gone too quiet for that. That night, she lay on a flattened box behind a shuttered building, staring into darkness. Her stomach was empty. Her limbs were heavy. But none of that compared to the feeling that her life had been thrown away by the very people it had built. She pressed a trembling hand over her chest and whispered into the night, "God, do you still know my name?" No thunder answered. No angel appeared. No miracle split the sky. Only the wind moved. Morning came, and she rose because living had become a habit more than a hope. She walked with no clear destination, carrying the weariness of years and the smell of rejection. By late afternoon, weak and dizzy, she drifted farther than usual until she reached Grant's Pen Road. That was when she heard it, singing. Not the careless music of passing cars or loud corners. This was different. It was steady, warm, alive with conviction. She lifted her head. Ahead stood a modest church with open doors. The sound pouring from inside was simple, but it reached her like water reaches cracked earth. People were praying. Voices rose together in faith, and something in Miriam, something buried under shame, hunger, and abandonment, stirred painfully back to life. She stopped outside the entrance and looked down at herself, dirty dress, unwashed skin, tired eyes, the smell of the street. For a moment, she almost turned away. Then one thought came to her with strange force. She had already been rejected everywhere else. So with trembling legs and the last scraps of courage left in her, Miriam Johnson stepped through the church doors. She did not know it yet, but heaven had chosen that ordinary evening on Grant's Pen Road to begin rewriting her story.
She carried them. She prayed for them. She gave them everything. And now, they don't even call her name. Lying on the street, she whispered, "God, do you still know my name?" To pray by their bedside, wipe their tears when they cried, worked her hands down to the bone so they would never be alone. Now she's laying in the street with nothing but her pain to keep. The ones she raised have turned away, like she never paved their way. Rejected by the one she loved, forgotten by the world above. But heaven heard a broken cry, even when no one stood nearby. God, do you still know my name? Or am I lost in all this pain? When everybody walks away, will you still remain? Hear my cry, see these tears I cannot hide. If no one else remembers me, Lord, don't pass me by. She stood outside her daughter's gate, hoping love would open the way. But the door stayed closed that night, and she turned back into the night. She saw her son across the street, but shame made him retreat. The womb that carried him in pain, now he pretends he don't know her name. But what they forgot, God still knew. Every prayer she ever grew, every sacrifice she gave was written down, heaven saved. God, do you still know my name? When I have nothing left to claim, when even blood has turned away, will you still stay? God, I'm calling you. There's nothing else that I can do. If the world forgets my face, let me find your grace. When my father and my mother forsake me, then the Lord will take me up. I have graven thee upon the palms of my hands. This poor woman cried, and the Lord heard her. Then she heard a sound coming from a church nearby. Voices lifted up in prayer. Something touched her deep inside. She walked in broken, but heaven saw her whole. That night God answered the cry of her soul. God, you still know my name. You call me out of all my pain. When everybody walked away, you made a way. God, you heard my cry. You saw every tear I cried. Now I'm standing here today because you made a way. The world may forget you, but God never will. He sees every tear. He knows your name.
The moment Miriam stepped inside the church on Grants Pen Road, the atmosphere wrapped around her like something she had not felt in years. Warmth. Not the heat of the Jamaican sun, not the suffocating closeness of crowded streets, but a different kind of warmth, the kind that touched something deeper than skin. Voices filled the room. People were praying, some with their eyes closed, some with tears streaming down their faces, others with hands lifted high as if reaching for something unseen, but very real. The air carried a sense of presence, something powerful yet gentle, something that made Miriam hesitate at the door. She became suddenly aware of herself, the smell, the dirt, the torn clothing. She lowered her head, almost turning back, but before she could step away, a woman from inside noticed her. Not with disgust, not with hesitation, with compassion. The woman walked toward her slowly, careful not to startle her, and said softly, "Come in, sister. You are welcome here." Those words hit Miriam harder than any insult she had received on the streets. Welcome. She had not heard that word directed at her in a very long time. Her legs trembled as she stepped further inside. A few people glanced at her, and for a brief moment, fear rose in her chest. Fear of rejection, of being told to leave, of being exposed as someone who did not belong. But no one pushed her away. Instead, a chair was quietly brought and placed near the back. "Sit here," the woman said gently. Miriam sat, her hands clenched together tightly in her lap, unsure of what to do, unsure of how to exist in a space where she was not being judged. The prayers continued. Then something shifted. One of the young men at the front, clearly the pastor, stepped forward. He was not old, not hardened by years of ministry. There was something sincere about him, something unpolished, yet genuine. His voice was steady, filled with conviction that did not feel forced. "Tonight," he said, "someone here feels forgotten. Someone here believes their life is finished. But the Lord sent me to say this: your future still looks good in Jesus' name." The words landed directly on Miriam. She did not know how she knew, but she knew. Her chest tightened. Her breathing became uneven. Tears began to rise. Not the quiet tears of survival she had grown used to, but something deeper, something breaking loose after being held in for too long. He continued, his voice growing stronger. "You may have been rejected by people, even by those who should have loved you. You may have been cast aside, looked down on, treated like nothing. But God has not rejected you. He sees you. He knows you. And He says, your story is not over." Miriam broke. The tears came, without restraint now, rolling down her face as her shoulders shook. For the first time in years, she did not try to hide them. People gathered around her, not crowding, not overwhelming, but supporting. Hands rested gently on her shoulders. "Let us pray with you," someone said. They did not ask her to explain herself. They did not demand her story. They did not judge her appearance. They simply prayed. And in that moment, something inside Miriam shifted. Not everything, not instantly, but enough. Enough for hope to take a small, fragile step back into her life. When the service ended, most people began to leave, but Miriam remained seated. She did not want to step back outside just yet. The streets were waiting for her, and she knew what they held, but something else was waiting too. She stood slowly and made her way toward the pastor. He turned to face her, his expression calm but curious. Up close, Miriam felt the weight of her condition even more. She smelled it. She saw it in his eyes. Not disgust, but awareness. She swallowed hard. "Pastor," her voice trembled, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," he said gently. She hesitated. This was not a small request. This was not something she had planned. But desperation and the faint spark of faith pushed her forward. "Can I come home with you?" The question hung in the air. For a moment, the pastor did not answer, not because he did not care, but because he understood the weight of what she was asking. He was a young, unmarried man. In Jamaica, appearances matter, reputation matters. People talk, people assume. Bringing a woman, especially one in Miriam's condition, into his home would raise questions. It could affect his ministry, his standing, his relationships. His mind moved quickly through all of it. What would the church say? What would the community think? Would people misunderstand his intentions? Would it damage everything he was trying to build? Then another thought came. What would Jesus do? He looked at her again, not at the dirt, not at the torn clothing, not at the smell. He saw a woman, broken, but still a woman, still human, still worthy. He took a breath. "Yes," he said. Miriam stared at him, unsure if she had heard correctly. "Yes," he repeated, "you can come with me." That night, everything changed. The walk to his house was quiet. Miriam kept her head low, unsure how to feel, unsure if this was real or if it would disappear like every other moment of kindness she had briefly known. When they arrived, the pastor opened the door and stepped aside. "Come in." Miriam entered slowly. The house was simple but clean, orderly, peaceful. It smelled of fresh air and care, something she had not experienced in years. He showed her to a room. Not just any room, the best room in the house. "This is yours for now," he said. She looked at the bed, the sheets, the space. It was too much. "I can't," she whispered. "You can," he said firmly. "Rest." He gave her clean clothes and left her alone. For a long time, she just stood there. Then slowly, she sat on the bed. Then she lay down. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Miriam Johnson slept in peace. Morning came differently this time, not with noise and urgency, but with quiet. And the smell of food. She woke up slowly, almost afraid to open her eyes in case everything had been a dream. But it wasn't. She sat up, touched the bed, looked around the room. Real. When she stepped out, the pastor was in the kitchen. "I made breakfast," he said, with a small smile. No one had said that to her in years. She sat at the table, unsure how to behave, unsure how to accept something so simple, yet so overwhelming. "Eat," he encouraged. She did. Every bite felt like restoration. Later that day, he took her to a store. Not a second-hand stall, not leftovers, a proper store. He bought her new clothes, clean clothes, beautiful clothes. Then he arranged for her to get cleaned up properly. Hair, bath, everything. As the layers of dirt and neglect were washed away, something else began to emerge. The woman she had always been. Not the broken image the streets had created, but Miriam. Strong, capable, alive. By the end of the day, even she barely recognized herself. But the transformation had only just begun, because what God was about to do next would not just change her appearance, it would change her position. Forever.
She walked in broken, forgotten, rejected. But heaven had already made a decision. God said, "I'm gonna send someone for her." She stood at the door, afraid to come in, carrying shame, rejection and sin. Looked at herself, said, "I don't belong." But something inside said, "Just hold on." Tears in her eyes, head hanging low. Didn't know where else she could go. But one voice said, gentle and free, "Come in, sister, you're welcome here." When the world had shut every door and she couldn't take it anymore, heaven spoke right on time. "I still see you, you are mine." He sent someone for me when I had nowhere to be. When the world turned its back, God remembered me. He sent someone for me to lift me from the street. I was broken, lost, and undone, but His love reached me. The preacher stood and began to say, "Someone here feels thrown away, but God sent me to let you know your future still looks good. Those words hit deep in her soul, like a fire making her whole. Years of pain began to break, hope started to awake. When she cried, heaven moved, every prayer was being proved. What man rejected in shame, God was calling my name. He sent someone for me, right when I couldn't see that my life was not over yet. God had a plan for me. He sent someone for me to show me mercy. Now I know without a doubt He never forgot me. This poor woman cried and the Lord heard her and saved her out of all her troubles. I was a stranger and He took me in. Beauty for ashes, joy for mourning. He opened up His home when nobody else would. Gave her a place to rest, just like Jesus would. Washed away the pain, gave her dignity again. What the world threw away, God picked up again. He sent someone for me. Now I'm not who I used to be. From the street to His presence, God restored me. He sent someone for me, and now I can see if He did it for me, He can do it for you. You may be forgotten by people, but heaven never loses your name. God will send help right on time.
The transformation did not stop at clean clothes, a warm bed, and a full stomach. That was only the beginning. What happened next moved faster than anything Miriam Johnson had ever imagined, faster than logic, faster than expectation, faster than even her own belief could comfortably accept. The pastor watched her closely over the next few days, not in suspicion, but in recognition. There was something about her, something sharp beneath the years of hardship. When she spoke, even quietly, there was structure in her thoughts. When she observed things around the house, she noticed details most people ignored. When she offered to help, she did not do it carelessly. She did it with precision. "Where did you learn to think like that?" he asked her one evening. Miriam paused, surprised by the question. "I had to," she replied simply. "When you have 6 children and nothing, you learn how to plan, or you watch them suffer." That answer stayed with him. The next morning, after breakfast, he made a decision. "I'm taking you somewhere," he said. Miriam looked at him, unsure. "Where?" "You'll see." They drove into New Kingston, the same place where her children had turned away from her, the same place where she had once stood invisible. But this time, everything was different. She was clean. She was dressed with dignity. And for the first time in a long time, she was not walking alone. They stopped in front of one of the largest corporate buildings in the city. Glass walls, security at the entrance, the kind of place Miriam would have never dared to enter before. Her heart began to race. "I don't belong here," she said quietly. The pastor looked at her firmly. "You belong wherever God places you." Those words carried her through the doors. Inside, the air felt different, controlled, polished, professional. People moved with purpose. Conversations were quick and efficient. Screens glowed with information she could not yet fully understand. The pastor spoke to someone at the front desk, then turned back to her. "Just talk," he said. "That's all you have to do." "Talk?" Miriam nodded, though uncertainty filled her. She was taken into a meeting room where a small group of managers sat around a table. They looked at her curiously, not dismissively, but cautiously, as if unsure what to expect. One of them spoke. "Tell us about yourself." Miriam took a breath. She could have told them about her suffering. She could have told them about rejection. But instead, she spoke about survival. She spoke about managing 6 children with almost nothing. She spoke about stretching resources beyond limits. She spoke about observing people, understanding needs, solving problems before they grew. She spoke about discipline, about accountability, about never wasting what little you have. As she spoke, the room changed. The curiosity turned into attention. The attention turned into interest. Because what they were hearing was not a broken woman. They were hearing a strategist. By the end of the conversation, one of the senior managers leaned back in his chair. "Can you start tomorrow?" Miriam blinked. "Start what?" "A position," he said. "Entry level for now, but we want to see how you work." She looked at the pastor. He nodded. "Yes," she said. The next day, Miriam Johnson walked into that building as an employee. Within the first week, people noticed her, not because she demanded attention, but because of how she worked. She listened carefully. She asked questions others overlooked. She solved problems quickly. She respected time. She respected structure. She wasted nothing, not effort, not opportunity, not words. Managers began to take note. Within 1 month, she was promoted, from entry level to management. People whispered, "How did she move so fast?" But the results spoke for themselves. Departments she touched improved. Efficiency increased. Confusion decreased. Within 3 months, she was promoted again. Director. Now her decisions affected entire sections of the company. She reorganized processes. She restructured teams. She identified weaknesses others had ignored for years. The same instincts that had helped her survive poverty were now transforming corporate systems. Within 6 months, the impossible happened. She was appointed CEO. The announcement shocked the company. A woman with no formal degree. A woman with no corporate background. A woman who had been homeless just months before. But those who worked closely with her knew the truth. She was not unqualified. She had simply been undiscovered. Under her leadership, the company began to change rapidly. Profits increased. Waste decreased. Morale improved. People felt seen, heard, valued. Because she led differently. She led with memory. She remembered hunger. She remembered rejection. She remembered what it felt like to be overlooked. And she refused to build success on the suffering of others. Then came the final rise. Within 1 year, the board made a decision that would make headlines across Jamaica. Miriam Johnson was appointed president, not just of the company, but of a powerful national organization tied to economic development. The same streets that had ignored her now spoke her name. The same city that had watched her suffer now watched her rise. But Miriam never forgot, because even at the top, she still remembered the night she asked a simple question. "God, do you still know my name?" Now the whole nation did. But what was coming next would test her heart in a way success never could. Because the past was about to return. And this time, She would not be the one begging. The first time her children heard her name again, it was not whispered in shame. It was announced. President Miriam Johnson. The words rolled across television screens, across radio stations, across newspapers and social media, carried by the same country that had once watched her sleep on cardboard and said nothing. Kingston was talking. Jamaica was watching. And her children could not escape it. They saw her face on screens in boardrooms, in offices, in homes, clean, strong, composed, dressed with quiet authority, speaking with clarity and power. A woman who now stood at the top of systems they were still trying to climb. At first, they did not speak. Then slowly, one by one, they began to reach out. The same phones that had once gone silent now rang. The same voices that had once said, "Mama, not now," now said, "Mama, we need to talk." Miriam did not rush to answer, not out of revenge, but because she had learned something powerful. Access is a privilege, and they had denied her theirs. The first to come was her eldest son. He did not call ahead this time. He came in person. He stood at the entrance of her office, nervous, uncertain, stripped of the confidence he once carried so easily. Security stopped him. "Do you have an appointment?" The question hung in the air like quiet justice. He swallowed. I'm her son." The officer looked at him carefully, then made a call. Inside, Miriam sat behind her desk, reviewing documents that would shape decisions far beyond anything she had once imagined. When the message came through, she paused. Her son. For a moment, memory tried to rise. Small hands, laughter, childhood moments that once defined her world. Then another memory came, a street, a turned head, a mother ignored. She closed her eyes briefly. "Send him in," she said. When he entered, he did not speak immediately. The room felt too large, too different, too far from the world where he had last seen her as someone beneath him. "Mama," his voice broke slightly. Miriam looked at him, calm, steady, composed. "Sit," she said. He sat. Silence filled the space between them. Then the words came, "I'm sorry." Simple, late, heavy. Miriam did not rush to accept it. "Sorry for what?" she asked quietly. He struggled. "For everything. For how he treated you. For not helping you. For—" He could not finish the sentence. She watched him carefully. "This is not about money," she said. "This is not about where I am now. This is about who you were when I had nothing." He lowered his head. She continued. "I came to you with no pride left, no strength left, no place to go, and you chose to protect your image instead of your mother." Tears formed in his eyes. "I was wrong," he said. "Yes," she replied. "You were." The truth sat between them, unsoftened. Then she leaned back slightly. "But I am not here to destroy you," she continued. "I am here because God did not destroy me." That changed everything. One by one, the others came, each with their own version of regret, each with their own excuses, explanations, apologies. Miriam listened to all of them, but she did not forget, and she did not pretend. Instead, she made a decision. She would forgive them. But she would not return to the same position she once held in their lives. Because love does not mean losing yourself. She helped them, but not blindly. She guided them, but not at the cost of her dignity. And for the first time, they saw her clearly, not as someone beneath them, but as someone they had failed to understand. Then came the moment nobody expected. The pastor, the man who had said yes when everyone else said no. He stood quietly in the background of her life as she rose, never asking for recognition, never seeking reward. He continued his ministry, continued helping others, continued living simply. Miriam never forgot. One evening, after a long day, she invited him to sit with her. "You changed my life," she said. He shook his head gently. "No, God did that." "But you obeyed," she replied. Silence passed between them, not uncomfortable, but full. Then she said something neither of them had expected. "Walk with me for the rest of my life." He looked at her, not as the homeless woman he once welcomed, not as the powerful president she had become, but as a woman, whole, strong, redeemed. "Yes," he said. Their marriage was not built on convenience, it was built on purpose. Together, they began something greater than success. They created programs for the homeless. They opened doors for those overlooked. They invested in communities that had been ignored. They made sure no one who was willing to rise would be left without opportunity. Miriam walked through the same streets that had once rejected her, but this time, she did not walk alone, and she did not walk in shame. People called her name, not in pity, in honor. But the most powerful thing about Miriam Johnson was not her title, not her wealth, not her position. It was this: she never became what hurt her. She became what saved her. And in doing so, she did not just change her life. She changed the lives of countless others. Because the woman who once asked, "God, do you still know my name?" became the answer to someone else's prayer. Power does not only attract respect, it attracts pressure, it attracts hidden agendas, it attracts smiling faces carrying private motives, and most dangerously of all, it attracts people who remember your value only after they see your elevation. By the time Miriam Johnson had fully settled into her role as president, her name had become larger than the office itself. She was no longer simply the woman who had risen from the streets into leadership. She was now a national symbol. Newspapers called her an icon of resilience. Church people called her living proof that God could reverse any condition. Community leaders quoted her speeches. Business circles studied her decisions. Politicians wanted pictures with her. The same Jamaica that had once stepped around her sleeping body now leaned in whenever she spoke. But visibility has a cost. The higher Miriam rose, the more carefully she had to look at every hand stretched toward her. Some hands were sincere. Some carried gratitude. Some wanted partnership for the good of the country. But others came dressed in smiles and respect while secretly measuring what they could gain from her influence. Miriam understood this faster than people realized. Hardship had trained her eyes. The street had taught her to read posture, tone, timing, and intention. Poverty had made her observant. Motherhood had made her discerning. Suffering had made her hard to deceive. Still, for all her wisdom, one weakness remained inside her heart: her children. No matter how much they had hurt her, some part of her still carried their names like unfinished prayers. She had forgiven them, but forgiveness did not erase memory. It only kept memory from becoming poison. Even after their apologies, even after their lowered heads and trembling voices, Miriam remained careful with them. She loved them, but from a place of awakened dignity. She would not return to the desperate mother standing at locked gates. She would not again reduce herself to earn love from those who should have given it freely. Yet one of them had not truly changed: Daniel. He was her third child, sharp-minded, polished, and ambitious to the point of danger. As a boy, he had always wanted more than the others. Not just more food or better shoes, but more importance, more control, more attention. If the other children were content with surviving, Daniel always wanted to dominate. Miriam had once seen that as leadership. Now she understood that leadership without character becomes hunger in a suit. When he first began visiting her regularly after her elevation, he came humbly, or at least he wore humility well. "Mama, I'm proud of you," he said, one afternoon, sitting across from her in her office lounge with a softness in his voice that almost sounded genuine. "You deserve all of this. After everything you went through, nobody can say God is not real." Miriam studied him while saying very little. She had learned that people often reveal more when silence makes them uncomfortable. Daniel continued, leaning forward with concern shaped carefully into his face. "But you need people around you that you can trust. This world is not simple. At your level, people will try to take advantage of you. They'll smile in your face and bleed your office dry behind your back." Miriam folded her hands. "And you think you should help me with that?" He gave a modest smile. "Not because I want anything, because I'm your son." The sentence hung in the air. Because I'm your son. There was a time those words would have melted her instantly. There was a time she would have clung to them in tears. But that woman had died somewhere between the locked gates, the cardboard bedding, and the turned heads on the street in New Kingston. Still, she did not shut him down. Instead, she watched. Over the next several weeks, Daniel became a more frequent presence. He attended a few public functions with her. He made himself useful in small ways. He anticipated things before being asked. He introduced her to people. He spoke the language of influence fluently. Where Miriam was direct and grounded, Daniel was smooth and socially agile. He seemed to understand rooms, agendas, and power structures instinctively. Even some members of her extended leadership circle began to mention it. "Your son is sharp. He could be useful. He understands the business-political environment well. You need loyal people near you." Loyal. That word nearly convinced her. Because beneath all her strength, Miriam still carried the tender ache of a mother wanting to believe that restoration was possible. She did not hand Daniel anything major. She was too wise for that. But she gave him a narrow path, an advisory position with limited access, limited authority, and clear boundaries. "If you are here," she told him plainly, "you are here to serve with integrity. My name is not a shortcut. My office is not an opportunity for private gain. If I find anything dishonest around me, I will cut it off." Daniel nodded without hesitation. Understood. And for a short while, everything appeared fine. He arrived early, he dressed well, he spoke respectfully, he stayed visibly disciplined. In meetings, he said the right things. In public, he looked like a redeemed son, standing honorably beside his mother. Reporters noticed, society noticed, social media even praised the image of reconciliation. But corruption rarely begins loudly. It begins in small permissions. A name recommended here, a conversation held privately there, a favor justified as necessary, a signature rushed, a detail omitted, a benefit hidden behind strategy. The first sign came when Miriam reviewed a set of contracts prepared for community redevelopment funding. She noticed a cluster of firms appearing repeatedly in places they should not have. Their proposals were weak. Their credentials were thin. Yet they were being moved forward as though somebody had quietly pressed on the scale. She said nothing at first. Instead, she marked the names. A few days later, a second irregularity surfaced. An internal note referenced verbal approval from the president's office on an arrangement she had never seen. The language was careful, almost professional enough to pass unnoticed. But Miriam had spent too many years fighting for survival to miss the smell of manipulation. Again, she said nothing. She began to watch more closely. Then came a third issue: money allocated for a social support initiative, something close to her heart because it involved housing, food access, and rehabilitation services for vulnerable women, had been slowed mysteriously, while another project, far less urgent and far more profitable to private interests, was being accelerated. The paperwork was clean. The timing was not. By now, her spirit was alert. She called for quiet internal reviews through two people she trusted absolutely. One, a senior compliance officer with no emotional ties to her family. The other, a long-time administrative strategist who had been with her from early in her rise and feared God more than people. "Do not alarm anyone," Miriam said. "Just bring me truth." Truth came back heavier than she expected. The names linked to the redirected opportunities were connected through shell relationships to people Daniel had recently introduced into her circle. Private calls had been made using his access. Meetings had been arranged off calendar. Language implying her approval had been used to pressure faster decisions. And while no money had yet been traced directly into his accounts, the pattern was clear enough to show intent. He was building a machine, not for her mission, for himself. When Miriam finished reading the report, she sat in complete silence. Not because she was confused, because the pain had arrived before the anger. This was not an attack from enemies. This was not a smear campaign. This was not a random betrayal from strangers. This was her son. Again. The little boy she had once held through fever. The child whose school fee she had paid by skipping meals. The young man she had defended in prayer when others called him too proud. The same son who had once turned his face from her on the street was now standing close enough to use her restored life as raw material for his ambition. That night, long after staff had left and the city lights blinked beyond her office windows, Miriam remained alone. She looked out over Kingston, the same city that had seen her fall, the same city that now watched her lead, and she felt the old ache return. Success had not removed her capacity for sorrow. If anything, it had sharpened it. She bowed her head and whispered, "Lord, teach me how to be righteous without becoming hard. Teach me how to be strong without losing mercy. And teach me how to confront evil, even when it wears the face of my child." The next morning, she made her decision. Daniel would answer directly. No intermediaries, no warning, no emotional preparation, no chance to construct a better lie. When the message reached him that the president wanted to see him privately, he entered her office with practiced confidence. He wore a tailored suit. His expression was composed. He expected discussion, perhaps even promotion. He did not yet understand that the room he had stepped into was not one of opportunity. It was one of judgment. "Mama, you wanted to see me?" he asked. Miriam did not gesture for him to sit immediately. She remained behind her desk, a file in front of her, her face unreadable. "Yes," she said, "close the door." He did. The sound of the latch settling into place seemed louder than usual. Only then did she motion toward the chair. He sat. She stayed standing a moment longer, then opened the file and slid several documents across the polished desk toward him. "Read." Daniel glanced down casually at first. Then his expression shifted. His eyes moved faster. His jaw tightened. "What is this?" he asked, too quickly. Miriam's voice was calm. "You tell me." He looked again. "These are misunderstandings. People at this level do things informally all the time. You know how systems work." "I know exactly how systems work," she replied. "That is why you are sitting here." He tried another angle. Nothing was finalized. There was no real damage done. No real damage, Miriam repeated. You used my office to imply approvals I did not give. You inserted your interests into places where justice should have guided decisions. You interfered with funding tied to vulnerable people. And you are telling me there was no real damage? His tone hardened slightly. Mama, you are taking this too personally. For the first time, something flashed in her eyes. Too personally, she said softly. The softness was more frightening than shouting. Daniel shifted in his chair. Miriam stepped around the desk slowly and stood near the window, not looking at him for a moment. When she finally turned back, her voice carried the force of years. You turned your face from me when I slept on the street, she said. You chose image over blood. Then God lifted me from dust to dignity, from rejection to leadership, from shame to honor. And instead of learning reverence, you saw my restoration and treated it like a business opportunity. He opened his mouth, but she raised her hand. No, you will listen. Silence fell hard. I was hungry, Daniel. Do you understand that? I was dirty. I was broken. I came to my children with nothing left but need, and you gave me absence. Now you stand in my office, dressed in respectability, trying to manipulate purpose for profit, and you think this is strategy? His voice dropped lower. I was trying to build something. For whom? She asked. He did not answer. For the people sleeping outside tonight, she continued. For the women abandoned and ashamed, for the children trapped in the same kind of lack we came from, or for yourself? The truth cornered him. His shoulders tightened. Mama. No, she said again, this time with controlled finality. Do not use that word to soften what you have done. He looked at her, then not as mother, but as authority, and perhaps for the first time in his life, he understood that she could not be bent by guilt. She returned to her desk and pressed a button. Two senior officials entered quietly and stood by the door. Daniel's eyes widened. Miriam's voice was formal now. Daniel Johnson, your advisory role is terminated effective immediately. Your access is revoked. All correspondence, approvals, and interactions linked to your recent activities will be reviewed. If further findings indicate criminal conduct, this matter will proceed through the proper channels. There will be no protection given in my name. His face went pale. You would do this to your own son? He asked, stunned. Miriam held his gaze. You did this to yourself. I am simply refusing to call darkness wisdom because it came through my blood. The sentence struck with the weight of a verdict. He stood slowly, but the arrogance had drained out of him. What remained was exposure. For a second, Miriam saw not the manipulator, not the ambitious operator, but the damaged boy underneath. The one who had learned to worship status because he feared weakness. The one who had hidden his shame behind performance. The one who had mistaken power for security. Pity rose in her. But pity would not be allowed to overthrow justice. Daniel looked as if he wanted to say more, perhaps to beg, perhaps to accuse, perhaps to collapse. In the end, he said nothing. He walked out. The door closed. Miriam remained still for several moments after he was gone. Then she sat down slowly and released the breath she had been holding. Her hands trembled, not because she doubted the decision, because righteousness costs something when it cuts across the flesh of your own heart. By evening, the first rumor had already leaked. By morning, the country was talking. Questions spread across media houses, corporate circles, churches, and political spaces. Had President Miriam Johnson really removed her own son from a position close to her office? Was there internal misconduct? Would she protect family? Would she hide the matter quietly? or would she choose principle over blood? Jamaica waited, and for Miriam, the real storm had only just begun. The country did not wait quietly. By the next morning, every major media house in Jamaica was carrying the same headline in different forms. President removes son from office. Family scandal at the top. Integrity or betrayal. Talk shows erupted. Radio hosts debated fiercely. Social media exploded with opinions. Some praised her, some questioned her, some accused her of being too harsh. Others said she had not gone far enough. But one question sat at the center of it all. Would she protect her son or protect the truth? Miriam did not rush to respond publicly. She had learned something powerful through her journey. Silence, when used correctly, is not weakness. It is control. Inside her office, the investigation deepened. Documents were reviewed again. Communications were traced. Every detail was examined with precision. There would be no mistake, no loophole, no claim that she had acted emotionally instead of factually, because this was no longer just a personal matter. This was national. This was legacy. Meanwhile, Daniel's world was collapsing. The same connections he had tried to build began to distance themselves. Calls stopped being returned. Meetings were cancelled. The quiet support he thought he had dissolved under the pressure of public exposure. For the first time in his life, he stood alone. And for the first time, he understood what his mother had felt, the weight of being abandoned. But unlike Miriam, he had not been abandoned by poverty. He had been abandoned by his own choices. Days later, Miriam stepped to the podium. Cameras flashed, microphones stretched toward her. The nation held its breath. Behind her stood the Jamaican flag. Before her stood the truth. She did not begin with anger. She began with clarity. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice steady, controlled, and filled with authority. "Today I address not just a situation involving my office, but a matter involving my own family." The room went silent. "There has been misuse of access and influence connected to my administration. Let me be clear. No individual, regardless of their relationship to me, will be allowed to compromise the integrity of the work we are doing for this nation." The words landed like thunder, not loud, but powerful. "I did not come from wealth. I did not come from privilege. I came from struggle. I came from hunger. I came from rejection. And I was given a second chance, not by people, but by God." She paused, "And I will not dishonor that second chance." Cameras zoomed in, faces leaned forward. Somewhere behind the scenes, Daniel watched. Tears filled his eyes, because for the first time, he was not hearing his mother as a parent. He was hearing her as truth. Miriam continued, "My son has been removed from his role. Any further findings will be handled through the proper legal channels. I will not interfere. I will not cover. I will not protect wrongdoing." A reporter called out, "Do you still love him?" The question cut through the room. Miriam did not hesitate. "Yes," she said. The simplicity of the answer stunned many. Love does not mean enabling. Love does not mean blindness. Love does not mean allowing destruction. Love means truth, even when truth hurts. Silence followed. Heavy, respectful, real. That speech changed everything. Public opinion shifted. Respect grew deeper, not just because she was powerful, but because she was principled. And in a world where many leaders protected their own at the expense of justice, she had done the opposite. But the story did not end there. Weeks later, something unexpected happened. Daniel came back, not as an advisor, not as a businessman, not as a son trying to gain access, but as a broken man. He stood outside her office, Not walking in confidently, not demanding entry, not using her name, just standing, waiting. When the message reached her, Miriam paused. Then she said quietly, "Let him in." He entered slowly. This time, there was no pride in his posture, no sharpness in his tone, no strategy in his eyes, only humility, only regret. "I understand now," he said, his voice low. "Everything you went through, I didn't see it. I didn't feel it. I only saw myself." Miriam said nothing. "I thought power meant taking," he continued. "I didn't know power meant becoming responsible." Silence. Then he said the words that mattered most. "I don't want anything from you." That was the difference. For the first time, he came without agenda. Miriam looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood. She walked toward him slowly, and without a word, she embraced him. Not because he deserved it, but because she had become something greater than pain. Redemption did not erase consequences, but it made restoration possible. From that day forward, Daniel's path changed. Not upward into power, but inward into character. And Miriam, she continued her work, but now with something even stronger than before. Not just authority, not just influence, but legacy. She built systems that protected the weak. She funded programs that restored dignity. She worked with the pastor, her husband, to transform communities that once looked like her past. And wherever she went, her story followed. Not as gossip, but as testimony. Because the woman who was once rejected by her own children had become a mother to a nation. And the woman who once asked, "God, do you still know my name?" had become the answer to thousands of prayers. Her life did not just change, it became a light, and that light could never be hidden again.